Hello, hi. So welcome to my YouTube channel. So I have picked another problem from LeetCode, which is related to graph. So this problem is related to topological sort. So if you haven't revised your topological sort algorithm and concept, then you must revise before attempting this problem. But I will also walk you some through some its concept and algorithm, how it works. Then I will solve this problem. Okay, so let's jump into the problem statement. Okay, so this is the problem. You can just search on Google. You you get a link and you can try yourself. Okay, this is a standard one, and I found it interesting, and I was also asked in Amazon interview. So So I also find like interesting use case of topological sort. So that's why I picked this problem uh, to share with you on a. Okay, so problem statement is you have a information about an different recipe. You are given a string array recipes and a 2D string ingredient. The ith recipe has a name recipe ith, and you create it if you have all needed ingredient from ingredient list. Okay, the recipe can also be ingredient for a other recipe. Okay, this word you need to note down. A recipe can be ingredient of other recipe, that is ingredient I may contain a string that is the recipe. Okay, so you are given a string array supplies containing all the ingredient you initially have, and you have an infinite number of supply of them. Okay, return the list of recipe that you create. You may return answer in any order, and note that two recipe may contain each other in their ingredient. Okay, so if I explain in simple way, so I have note down some of example here for this one. If you can find, this is the example. Recipe is a bread and ingredient yeast and flour. So to make a bread you need a ingredient yeast and flour, two ingredients you required to make a bread, and we are given a supplies of these three ingredients initially: yeast, flour and corn. So you can easily create a bread. If you see, you have a yeast, you have a bread, then you can create a bread. You have a flour, you can create a bread. Okay, so if you see the second example, there are the two recipe you need to create: bread and sandwich. An ingredient required for bread, that is first array in this list, and sandwich, for sandwich this is the list of ingredient you required. And supplies we are given yeast and flour and meat. Okay, so easily we can make. If you see, problem statement says we have unlimited ingredient supply. Okay, note down. And any recipe can be ingredient of other recipe. Okay, so if you see, first what you if you try to make a bread, you need a yeast and flour. That is basic one supply ingredient you can make. But for sandwich, if you see, bread is not a basic ingredient, but once you create a bread using these ingredients, you can use this bread to make a sandwich with meat. So you can also make a sandwich. Okay, similarly recipe given a bread, sandwich and burger, and ingredient we have given yeast, flour, that is for the bread, and bread and meat for the sandwich, and third is the sandwich, meat, bread, that is for the burger, and supply we are given again yeast, flour and meat, which is the basic one. So we can make a all these three. How? If you see, if you try to make a sandwich, then you need a burger, you need a bread, right? So you first need to create a bread, because bread has a ingredient which is a fundamental, means which is the initially provided in supply. So you will need to make a bread first with the supply ingredient. Once we have created a bread, then we can utilize with this meat to create a sandwich. Once a sandwich is created, this recipe can use the ingredient of burger, that is the sandwich meat and bread. So to create a burger, you have dependencies on these two recipe. If you see the, if you link the problem statement, we will see any recipe can be dependent on other recipe which need to create first, which need to be created first, right? So suppose if you're trying to create a burger, then you will need to create a first you need to have a dependency on sandwich, that is again a recipe, and you also a dependency on a bread, that is also a recipe. So you have to create these two recipe first, right? So once you create, then you can create a burger. So I will map this problem how the topological sort help here and best fit here to solve this problem. So let me show you how the, if you remember topological topological sort. So if you see, topological sort is like basically meant for the directed acyclic graph, right? There are directed if u and v. What mean by u and v? If you interpret this notation, means u comes first before v. That's the mean, right? If you interpret this uh, representation or this dependency, so that's, if you see, if we have like a to b and b to c and c d to c, what it mean by? It mean by to complete p, you you required a, right? Similarly for c you required b and d, and for a you don't need required anything, it doesn't depend on any other things. So if you remember in uh, topological sort, we calculate the in degree, right? So how, if you see in degree, what is the in degree? In degree means incoming edges toward that vertex. Okay, in degree and degree in number of no, incoming edges toward vertex are node. Okay, so count, if you count the in degree means total number of incoming edges, means total number of dependencies required to complete first in order to complete the particular vertex or node. Okay, so that's the, this is where it fit best. If you see this, if you draw how I draw this one. So let me just remove here from here. So if you see how I will map to this in a graph and solve this problem using topological sort. So if we have initially like ingredient and recipe and supply, right? Let me write down the supply here. From here, let me just copy it. Let me just copy it from here. And so if you, how you will map for each supply, you, for each ingredient initially, supply don't have dependency to anyone. Let me write down the ingredient. Let me just, initially you have supply, right? That is the independent of any other recipe. If you see, supply is the basic one, means raw material. Okay, so if you see the ingredient, so and map to the recipe, so how you will map in the form of graph. A U to B, how you represented U, if you remember, U to B means U comes first before V. Okay, that's meaning, means east come first before the bread. It depend on bread, right? And similarly for the flour, and it depend on the, means it require, means bread required flour. So I am represent in terms of dependency graph. Okay, so if you see the, for bread, for sandwich you require the bread, sandwich, and I am taking second recipe and second ingredient list, and I need a meat. We need a meat first to create a sandwich, right? Similarly, if you see the burger, you required the three ingredient, right? First is sandwich, then you able to create the burger. And meat, I have already in a meat, so I just add it here. That it can be a list of, it can be a list of recipe who is depend on this ingredient. Okay, so this is how we will represent it. So for meat, required sandwich, and you also required the in a burger, right? Burger. That's it. And in bread, if you bread, you also require the using bread, you create a sandwich and burger both, right? Using, if you see, bread is a recipe, is again a recipe, but it's also ingredient of sandwich and burger. So you just add it here. Okay, so is it right? That's it, correct. So once you have created a graph and it's in degree, how you calculate the in degree for each recipe, you just count it incoming uh, edges, means you just count, increment its count. Okay, that's represent the how many dependencies need to be fulfilled before start to this current recipe. Okay, so that's the creation of the graph and calculation of in degree. Once you have created the graph and in degree calculation, you have a initially supply that doesn't depend on the its raw material, doesn't depend on any other uh, ingredient or that is a recipe. So it's a basic one. So you just, you, what you need to do, that will be a zero dependency, right? Means zero in degree, no dependencies to other ingredient. So you just create a queue for this one because it's have zero in degree, and try to reduce once you like created, what I mean by u and b. Okay, if you remember U and V, once you completed the U, you have a like already completed one dependencies that required to create B, you have already created, just decrease its in degree. Okay, x minus 1. Okay, minus minus means one dependency is already completed and other dependency need to completed. Once all the dependencies completed of the B, then we can create a B, right? We can create a recipe that we will do here. Start from the zero in degree ingredient, and once all the required ingredient is already completed, then have a we can have a recipe in answer that can be created using the ingredient. Okay, so let's solve this problem using uh, using the topological sort. Okay, so let me just write the code for it. You can try yourself. I think you can do that. Let me just what I will first I will require to create a graph and integrity, right? So let's create a map. This is a strict type, and I will require for each ingredient can be used in a different recipe. So need a list of strings which represent the recipes. Okay, so what is represent the ingredient recipe map, right? In grid recipe and ingredient recipe, just name it. You can name it anything. Okay, so as map and copy it here, and I also need a degree. So first it will be the recipe, right? And recipe, why recipe? Because recipe required the ingredient. That is the dependency for that recipe. And how many ingredient required? I will just count here. Integer, integer. So in degree. Okay, so let me calculate it first. So start from int I is equal to 0 to let iterate recipe one by one, and it's the array. So just need to increment iterate by the length, index by index, and for each string recipe, and I just need to do like this, right? For each recipe, I have a for string in grid. Let me do it. Dot get, right? It will be a list of ingredient that required to make this recipe, particular recipe. Okay, so how I will do that? First, I will create a map that I have shown here, like this one. So so let me just compute if absent, correct. So first it will be a key will be the ingredient, and this ingredient can be used in multiple recipe, right? So new array list dot add, and this, so this comes first before it, if you interpret in terms of U and V. And also I need to count the ingredient of this one, right? By the put operation for this be get degree. Let me just not this way, just count it here. Get or default recipe plus one. Okay, Is it right? So using this loop, once I have iterated all the recipe which and created a graph for it and also calculated the indegree of each recipe. Once it completed, I needed, I need a uh, queue, right? I, so initially, if you remember the topological sort, so that is where it require the indegree and the queue initially. We will put all the zero dependencies ingredient to start with. Means no dependency required for those ingredient. So which is supplies, right? New array queue. I am using this array queue. Okay. So for each supply string supply. Okay. So what I need to do, just q dot offer. Means you are adding each supply initial provided the ingredient. Okay. So I need to calculate the answer, means what are the recipe we can uh, create using ingredient array list. Okay, so while not empty, q not empty, applied is not empty. What I need to do first, I will poll. If you poll this, it will be the ingredient, right? So it's ingred. Just name it ingred. Q dot poll. Okay. So for let me iterate all each recipe that is uh use all all those recipe which use this ingredient, which we can get by this graph, right? So what I need to do is string recipe and dot get or default. Why get our default? Because maybe there are basic ingredient provided in supply, but those are not used in this, right? So that's why. So what I need to do, recipe new array list default one, correct? Is it? So for each recipe, once you completed it, decrease the once you pull out, means you have completed this ingredient, means you have picked this ingredient, no dependency, then you like you decrease its dependency, means you are decreasing its ingredient in degree, right? Put it here and just get remove from here -1. Is it right? If let me remove from here and cmt, that will be a tell us count, means remaining dependencies that need to required. So once it is 0, means all the dependencies, means all the integers is 0. What it mean by? It mean by you need to put it into answer, right? Means that recipe is already created. Means all its ingredient is already visited. Means you have created all its ingredient, either supply or it's a dependent recipe. Then you can create this recipe, right? So just add into one answer. What you add? The recipe you have created and return it. Okay, so let me run it first. Oops. Okay, first is past. If you see this is required, but in this case you we got only bread, but we don't haven't sandwich in our answer in our output, right? So why? So once I have created a bread and put into answer, and for sandwich if you see bread is required, right? Okay, got it. So a recipe can be an ingredient of another recipe, right? In this case, if you see for sandwich, once you created a bread and you have put a into answer, right? If you see using this, you created a bread and you put into answer and you pop out, but you need to put into back into ingredient so that it can be used in other ingredient in other recipe. Okay, so what I need to do, just put into once recipe is particular recipe is created, that it can be used in other ingredient also, right? In other recipe as ingredient. So let me just run it. Let me see. Yeah, so that's it. That now sample test case got passed. Let me submit it. Yeah, so now it's accepted for all 114 test cases. So that is it is interesting one and twisted. If you looking for the topological sort use case, so that's one I found it interesting. That's why I picked this problem to discuss with you all. Okay, thank you. Please subscribe my channel. You get meaningful and more interesting problem that can be asked in interviews and also that can be in online assessment also. Okay, so that is like I will pick like every day whenever I create a video, I try to create a meaningful and most important I feel that I should discuss. So that problem I pick, not a random one. Okay, okay, so that's it. Happy coding.